They smiled at my brother like he'd already won the world. My chest broke when Grandpa called him the pride of this family, in front of everyone. They laughed, clinked forks, and I sat frozen. Then Grandpa opened the will and looked at me. What he said after that made my world tilt. The room smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. They had no idea what was coming next. My throat went tight when Grandpa smiled at my brother and said, "You've always been the pride of this family." That sentence hit me like ice. I had spent the last 5 years driving down every week, folding his laundry, sitting through his pills and nights. Lucas waved and smiled like it was his medal. People leaned in. The house felt full and small. My mother wiped her eyes. Cousins joked. Grandpa reached for the glasses on the table, and everyone relaxed. He'd been the steady center for as long as I could remember. I kept my hands folded on my knees and felt the scrape of my wedding band. This was the moment. I'd known family nights would include a will reading someday, but I was not ready for how public this hurt would be. That smile at Lucas was heavy with something else, an old habit of calling winners before the race was over. A half hour earlier, I had tucked an envelope into my bag. It was small and legal, and it trembled against my thigh. I told myself it was only paperwork. I wasn't allowed to open it. But I had read the lines once in a lawyer's office, under a promise of silence. They laughed again and raised their glasses. I kept my face calm. Inside, everything switched on. The folding of the paper felt loud when Grandpa cleared his throat. After dinner, the family moved into the parlor. The grandfather clock marked soft beats. I felt the weight of everyone's eyes, curious and comfortable. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29, teach middle school. Lucas is 32, works in sales, and knows every smile that opens doors. Mom is 60, polite and quick to smooth things over. Grandpa Harold had always favored Lucas in stories. "Your brother was born with a brave heart," he'd say, and we'd all cluck. Small favors turned into large assumptions. Lucas bullied his way into family attention, the way some people collect business cards. He'd borrowed money before. He'd promised to help with the house and never did. When the lawyer cleared his throat, the room leaned forward. The will was folded in a black folder, heavy with printed pages. Grandpa read in a slow voice, and his eyes met mine several times. The first bequests were small and warm, necklaces and cash gifts. Then he paused. Heads turned. He said Lucas had been the pride and smiled that same smile. Everyone laughed again, the way people laugh to cover surprise. I watched Lucas's chest puff out like a peacock. I watched my hands. The lawyer then read a clause that made the air drop out of the room. A living trust, conditional, with a list of responsibilities attached. I felt something clench in my ribs. The clause was precise. Care, management of medical needs, and stewardship for 10 years. My name was underlined as the alternate executor if conditions were unmet. I swallowed and forced a polite face while the room started to whisper. I kept the envelope I had tucked earlier in my bag. It held something that could make this clause mean more than words. After the reading, the pity turned into conversation, and then into argument. Lucas stood and declared he would manage everything. The house, the accounts, the repairs, with that confident voice he used to sell cars. Mom smiled and accepted it like a peace token. I heard the relief in Lucas's laugh. It was loud and careless. But the conditional trust was a trap for someone who meant to ignore responsibility. Grandpa had left a clause requiring quarterly accounting and independent audits. He'd been specific. It mentioned bank statements, paid invoices, and a professional probate review. I had seen the clause in that small lawyer's office months before when Grandpa and I met alone. He'd fixed my hand with a tired look and said, "If he can't do it, he won't be the last to know." 2 weeks after the reading, Lucas moved in. He repainted the study and unpacked his expensive suits. He started collecting checks for maintenance and scheduled contractors he recommended. At first it looked normal. Then small things slipped. Missed receipts, late bills, one canceled insurance premium. I began to keep quiet records. I photographed invoices. I emailed banks with polite questions and saved replies. I didn't tell anyone yet. I found that Lucas had transferred funds into accounts I didn't recognize. I felt the old ache, the one from the dinner table, grow into a hot, steady anger. I knew where the law could help. Probate rules and bank oversight were slower, but solid. It would take patience and paper. I made an appointment with a probate attorney under the guise of asking procedural questions. When Lucas bragged to a cousin about taking care of the estate, I smiled and wrote down the date. Lucas's care became decision-making without accountability. He sold Grandpa's old truck for maintenance, arranged for a remodel that produced a single contractor invoice with no details, and started encouraging relatives to sign temporary loan agreements. I watched him charm neighbors into thinking he was protecting the family legacy, while quietly moving cash. One afternoon, a utility turned off because a quarterly payment was missed. A delivery halted for unpaid taxes. An insurance policy lapsed. Conversations that had been private became loud in the kitchen. My mother began to murmur that maybe Lucas needed help. Lucas told anyone who'd listen that handling an estate was messy and asked for trust. He framed questions as stress, and people softened. I sent certified letters asking for copies of receipts and an inventory. The letters were formal, no emotion, and they landed like cold facts on the table. Lucas dismissed them as bureaucratic and folded his arms. He called me overprotective. He accused me of trying to make him look bad in front of relatives. I stayed calm and did not respond in kind. I found a bank statement that showed a transfer to an account under a company name Lucas had used before, one he once called his side project. The amount was significant. I took a photo and texted it to the probate attorney with a short note. "This looks off." The attorney replied that if transfers lacked proper documentation, we could petition the court to freeze accounts and demand an audit. That night Lucas threw a small dinner for family friends to celebrate handling things. He smiled wide and toasted to the future. I watched him raise his glass and felt the plan tighten around him like a hinge. He had no idea the legal motion was lining up. I assembled a team quietly. 2 allies were enough. Mia, the probate attorney who smelled like coffee and spoke in exact sentences, and Omar, a bank compliance officer I met through a charity board. Mia taught me how to turn invoices and messages into legal exhibits. Omar showed me the bank forms for suspicious activity reports and the protocol for a temporary freeze in probate disputes. We planned in small steps. First, gather evidence. Every invoice, every text, every empty contractor receipt. Second, file a petition in probate court showing breaches of fiduciary duty and requesting an emergency accounting. Third, ask the court for a temporary restraining order on transfers while auditors reviewed transactions. Fourth, notify tax authorities if unpaid liabilities showed up. All legal, calm, and paper-based. I kept a spreadsheet. It was clinical and cold. Dates, amounts, sources, and screens. I printed copies and organized them in a binder labeled with the date and a single word, Harold. I photographed receipts with timestamps and saved voicemail messages from contractors who said they'd never been paid. Mia filed the petition with measured language. She didn't use fire or fury, she used duty and breach. The judge's clerk set a hearing within 3 weeks because the request included potential misappropriation of funds. Omar put a request in the bank's compliance queue and placed a soft hold on suspicious transfers while they reviewed documentation. Lucas was blindsided. He kept acting like this was a minor inconvenience. He tried to charm our allies to whisper and explain. Mia countered with a polite demand for immediate documentation. The court date loomed. I breathed the kind of breath people take when they know the next part will be decisive. The next 2 weeks were all discreet moves. I contacted an independent auditor recommended by Mia. I reached out to an old family friend, Rita, who kept careful records of Grandpa's prescription orders, and who had once witnessed Lucas taking a checkbook without asking. Rita agreed to testify if needed. I called contractors and asked for sworn statements about unpaid work. I kept my face public and private life rigidly separate. At family lunches I was pleasant and small. I let Lucas talk at length about his big plans, while I silently logged dates and times. I met with Omar twice and gave him copies of suspicious payments. He confirmed the proper forms were in motion, and that the bank would not allow large withdrawals tied to the estate while their review was active. Mia prepared a short list of questions for Lucas to answer under oath. Where funds had been transferred, what invoices supported transfers, and whether loans had been made to third parties. The list was surgical. It didn't accuse. It demanded proof. The night before the hearing, she emailed me and said, "We'll ask for an accounting, and if their answers don't match the paper trail, we ask for removal of authority." The morning of the hearing felt thin, like paper between two palms. I drove to the courthouse with Mia, the binder heavy on the passenger seat. We walked in like two people carrying a careful truth. In my bag was a small letter from Grandpa that said simply, "Trust facts, not feelings." The hearing felt like a test. Mia laid the binder on the table and walked the judge through dates, transfers, and missing invoices. She showed bank statements with transfers to a company Lucas had registered the year before. Rita testified about unpaid prescriptions and missing checks. Omar explained the bank's soft hold and why it was necessary to prevent asset flight during probate review. Lucas squirmed. He kept trying to charm the judge and family members in the gallery, but the paper spoke. He offered vague contractor names and a handwritten ledger with holes. Under cross-examination, small lies unraveled. A contractor confirmed he had not received a final check and produced a time-stamped image of a cleared invoice. Another vendor testified they'd been asked to bill to a personal account, not the estate. Mia asked the court to appoint an independent auditor and to remove Lucas's control until the audit finished. She framed it as protecting Grandpa's wishes, not punishing anyone. The judge paused, then issued a temporary restraining order on transfers and appointed an auditor. The bank reinforced its freeze. The tools of bureaucracy clicked into place. Over the next month, auditors uncovered multiple misapplied payments and loans to third-party accounts Lucas controlled. When asked, Lucas tried to say the transfers were legitimate reimbursements. The auditor found no supporting receipts. Tax notices surfaced for unpaid liabilities Lucas had ignored. The probate court ordered restitution, and the bank reversed transfers. On the day the first restitution was executed, Lucas realized consequence. He called me voice thin, asking if we could talk and fix this privately. I didn't call him back. The estate's money began to be used for intended purposes: medical bills, home repairs done by verified contractors, and a small trust established for community scholarships Grandpa had always wanted. After the court's order, the house felt different. Repairs were done right. Nurses came on schedule. The scholarship fund sent its first award to a local student studying nursing. People stopped whispering and started asking how they could help. Mom began to cry in private, quietly grateful. The small victories added up into a larger piece. Lucas moved out after the judge required restitution and oversight. He kept his head down and started a job in another state. He called once, awkward and apologetic, but never asked to come home. Our family gatherings changed. Some relatives stayed close, others fell away. I felt grief for what had been lost, the idea of a single, united family, and relief that Grandpa's wishes were honored. The real change was quiet. I stopped carrying the binder like armor and put it in a locked drawer. I met with the auditor one last time to sign off on the final report. Mia texted a thumbs-up emoji and wrote, "Orderly work." I went to Grandpa's grave on a rainy afternoon and sat on the bench where he used to point out birds. I whispered thanks for his foresight and for the legal scaffolding he left. I didn't become proud. I became steady. The money helped, but what mattered was that the estate served Grandpa's values, not old habits. The revenge wasn't dramatic. It was legal, clean, and quiet, an undoing of misuse and a setting right. It felt like closing a door without slamming it. In the end, I learned that fairness sometimes needs a polite, relentless paper trail. I also learned that people can change or walk away. You can grieve both. I still miss Grandpa's laugh, but I sleep. The house is warmed by honest work now, and that is enough.